Okay, everybody, welcome to the first live Get Lit with Lynn. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy that you're here from Wilmington and Chicago and Boston. And are you from Wilmington, Lovis? All right, there you go. All right, so, and we have some more people joining us. I'm just beginning. Please come have a seat, make yourself comfortable. I don't know if that sign's in the way. You might want to tilt it down. So I typically like to start Get Lit with Lynn by talking about some news in the publishing world. So I'm going to share a few things with you. The big news that I have to share today is, Deb, I bet you know. Putting her on the spot. What happened today in publishing or in the literary world was the announcement of the Pulitzer Prizes. Oh, like this. Yes, that happened today. So we have some of those books, and I would like to show them to you. Yesterday, they announced the Pulitzers for journalism, and today was for literature. So the winner of the Pulitzer for fiction is called The Netanyahus, an account of a minor and ultimately even negligible episode in the history of a very famous family. Those of you who followed, I know it's a funny title, right? Also, interestingly, it's a paperback. And some of you will know the Benjamin Netanyahu as the now former Prime Minister of Israel. So this is the winner for fiction. And the winner for nonfiction, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it with me, is, hang on, guys. We have the history book is Covered with Night by Nicole Eustace, Cuba, An American History by Ada Ferrer. The biography is Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South. And then for general nonfiction, Invisible Child, Poverty, Survival, and Hope in an American City by Andrea Elliott, which got quite a lot of press when it was published. And then there's a book of sonnets by Diane Seuss. And for drama, a book called Fat Ham, which I understand is based on Hamlet, and it's actually not in publication. So that's a loss that we can't get it. But we have these books available here in the store. So that was exciting. Sure, absolutely. I don't have the books that I'm talking about. I didn't make a list. We can maybe do that afterwards. I see some of you are taking notes, and I am recording this, so I'll upload it and you can watch it again. I thought it would be interesting to look at some of the previous and recent Pulitzers for fiction in the last few years, so I pulled them. I'm interested if any of you have read them. Last year was Louise Erdrich, The Night Watchman, which I haven't read yet, but I hear is fantastic. You know, can I just hand them to you when you're done? Okay, the year before that was Colson Whitehead for the Nickel Boys.
I read that.
You read that? Did you like it?
I like him.
I like him too.
So I've read a few other.
Yeah.
So.
He's so imaginative, isn't he? And devastating, can be devastating.
Right.
So the Nickel Boys, and the thing about Colson Whitehead is he is one of a small group of writers who have won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for fiction. So in between, he had the year before that, I'm going backwards chronologically, was The Overstory by Richard Powers. This is a book about trees. And Richard Powers is a very intellectual, dense, complicated, but ultimately, I think, rewarding writer. I've read a few of his books. The year before that, well, actually, there were a few in between. Was this book Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which, have you read it? Has anyone read it? I read it. I enjoyed it. It's a really lovely story. It didn't feel like a Pulitzer, but it's well written. And then the year before that was Colson Whitehead's first Pulitzer, The Underground Railroad, which will just tear your heart apart. But really imaginative. I don't know if you know it, but the premise of this book was he said he always, when he learned about the Underground Railroad in school, in his imagination, he thought of a real railroad. Yeah. And so in this book, it's a real train. Yeah. And then the year before that was The Sympathizer. So that's as far as I went back in Pulitzers, but it's a great list. I mean, there are a number of awards that are given for literature. I do tend to focus mostly on fiction in my own reading. And there are a number of awards that I really trust. And I think the Pulitzers are, they give awards to good books, except for less. So I might not have voted for that. The National Book Award is great books. The winner of the National Book Award this past year was Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. Did you read it? So good. If you guys haven't read it, I love it so much. And the Booker Prize, which used to be just foreign writers and now is made American writers eligible, which when they first announced, everybody said, oh, the award's going to go down the tubes. But the Bookers are really challenging. From a literary standpoint, they can be really, have you read some of them? Yeah. Which ones did you like? Yes. Oh, he's such a great writer. He's so good, and everything he does is different. We're talking about Ishiguro. So speaking of Pulitzers, there is one more Pulitzer that I brought with me, which is from a few years back. Yep, A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, which I am currently rereading. And the reason I'm rereading it is because she has a brand new book out, The Candy House, which is a sequel. And I'm told it's not essential to read Goon Squad, but I wanted to just reread Goon Squad. Let's get to know it. So this is what I'm reading now, and this is what I'm reading next. So thanks, Kate. So a couple of other things that have been published recently, and some as recently as today, I wanted to bring to your attention. And I have, as you can see, I have a big pile here, so I'll go through them kind of quickly. Azara Nathesi, you might know her from reading Lolita in Tehran, which was a big seller. This is her newest book, Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times. And, you know, as a bookseller, that's a message that speaks right to my heart, that books are something that we need to turn to when life gets challenging. And I love her take on that. And, you know, here in the store, if you walk around, you'll see that we have very big displays of banned books, because that's important to us to make this statement that books are what we need, books are how we learn, books are what challenge us. So that's what has to happen. This is going in a completely different direction. The Palace Papers by Tina Brown, which just came out and sold out so fast at our store. Tina Brown, of course, being a Brit, but having spent time in the United States as the editor of Vanity Fair magazine and of The New Yorker. But I guess she's got a lot of ins, and she can tell you everything you need to know about Meghan and Harry and William and Kate and the future of the monarchy, and any dish that you want is apparently all in this book. I'm just going to mention a couple other interesting nonfiction books. This is not new at all, Atomic Habits by James Clear, but it is really popular and just really, like, we're all trying to break bad habits and build good habits. I was just talking to my colleague about how I just joined a new gym and yeah, actually have to go, and I haven't done that yet. So you walk past the gym, right? I walk past the gym every day, right? Don't I look fit? So Atomic Habits, I think, is a very worthwhile book. Robin Roberts from which morning show is Robin Roberts? Good Morning America. I mean, she's become, I think, kind of a hero with sort of publicly dealing with her cancer, and now her wife has cancer. And she, this is the sort of book that's just meant to buoy your spirit up and give you wise words to help you fight challenges. And I think it's actually lovely. I really like it. I like her attitude. I respect someone who can be optimistic in the face of everything she's gone through. And of course, you can see it's packaged just like the perfect graduation gift, because it's almost graduation season. And then Susan Cain, who became well known for her book Quiet, now has a new book, Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. And I think she's really good at turning ideas on their heads and saying, oh, being lonely can be a good thing. Oh, being sad can be a good thing. So I like looking at her approach. A couple of books that we're really excited about here at Barnes & Noble are some of our monthly picks. And I have been reading a couple books lately that you would call beach books and really enjoying them. This Birds of California. It's a romance about two people who used to be child stars in a very popular TV show, and now they're later in life and they're dealing with some things. And it was really good. It was fun. It was a fun read that didn't quite go where I expected, which I liked, which was good. Then there's also this book, Lessons in Chemistry, which is getting a lot of attention. And this is, now, if you look at this cover, you will say that this is chick lit, and it's just the cover does not represent what the book is. It's about a woman in the 1950s who's trying to become a chemist and has a really hard time keeping a job because a woman chemist is just not a thing. She falls in love, she has a child, she becomes a single mom, and she winds up starting a cooking show where she talks all about the chemistry of cooking. But it's a really feminist book. It's a really interesting look at being a woman in a man's field, or what was a man's field. It's quirky. The main character is named Elizabeth Zott. And so everybody calls her Zott. And I just like that. It's fun to say. And this is another fun book. If you want to do some armchair travel and go to Positano, which has always been on my bucket list, and I haven't made it there yet, you can go by reading this book. And it also has a little time travel thrown in about a woman who very sadly loses her mother when she's 30 and her mother's 60. And she goes on this trip to Positano that they had planned to do together. And there she encounters her mother when she was 30 years old. And they hang out together. So that's kind of fun.
That's been a really popular vacation spot in the past couple of years, right?
To Positano? Yeah. So we should go. We should go. Have you been there? We need to go. Okay. And another featured Barnes & Noble monthly pick is Electra by Jennifer Saint. So, you know, we are really enjoying these books based on the classics. And this, of course, brings to mind my favorite, Madeline Miller, and her two wonderful books, which are tip top on Book Talk and very, very popular and sell a ton of copies, and they're terrific. She's great. Okay. Now, this is brand new today, Jennifer Weiner. Give her a shout out because she's a big Philadelphia author. So she has her big blockbuster brand new summer book. This just came out, this Zabar's, A Family Story with Recipes. So as a former New Yorker, I spent a lot of time in Zabar's. It is so much fun shopping there. So this like behind the scenes story should be fun, but I'm just like, just look at that picture, look at the guys where you go and you want to buy locks and they're like, which kind? And they have 10 different kinds. And you're like, who knew there were so many kinds of locks? This is also getting a ton of buzz. Out of the Corner by Jennifer Gray. You know the Jennifer Gray, nobody puts baby in the corner, right? So Jennifer Gray, who was such a huge star in Dirty Dancing, who then was persuaded to have a nose job and became unrecognizable, and it ruined her career. So now she's 62 and she has written a memoir. She also happens to have been engaged at one point to Johnny Depp. So they keep going to her and asking for quotes about what Johnny was like to date. And anyway, there she is having her say, finally, coming out of the corner. What else do I have for you? Okay. So now I have some other new fiction. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to pause. Do you have any questions? Do you guys have any questions? I just keep talking. Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm going to jump back before I show you the rest of the fiction I have for you, because I forgot to talk about the rest of my publishing news. Okay. So there was an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago that I think is very important to mention, and you might have seen it. And the headline is, "Once cast as a villain, Barnes & Noble turns the page." Did you see this article? Oh, I'm glad you asked. So this is the story of how Barnes & Noble went from villain to hero. So here's what that means. In the mid to late 1990s, when Lynn Riggio was still running the company, Barnes & Noble started opening the superstores, really created that concept of the huge store with the comfy chairs where you could get your coffee and sit all day and read books. And they were strategically opening these stores, and that was not good for independent bookstores. And they became the enemy of the independent bookstore because they were putting independent bookstores out of business. When I first started working for Barnes & Noble in 1997, it was the first superstore that they opened in Brooklyn, where I lived at the time. And we were right down the road from Community Bookstore, which was the beloved local independent store. And people in the neighborhood were not happy to see Barnes & Noble. And they created these little tiny leaflets like this big. And on it was really small print about how terrible Barnes & Noble was and don't shop there. And they would come in the store and they would stick the flyers in the books so that when customers were looking through books, they would fall out and fall on the floor, and they were all over the floor. And anyway, that passed and time went on. And now we're in a different era where Barnes & Noble has a new CEO, somewhat revising our mission in that we're moving towards smaller stores and more community involvement. And we're on the same team as the independent bookstores because we all want the bricks and mortar stores to survive. And the independent bookstores, whatever their ambivalence about being up against Barnes & Noble, know that they need Barnes & Noble, and we all need each other against he who shall not be named. So it was very exciting, to see that validated in the New York Times for what it's worth. No, Community Bookstore is still in business. It's been through a couple owners since then. It's thriving. It's very popular. They managed to coexist happily. So it's good. And then I'll mention another very important bit of publishing news, which is this magazine, which I love, Poets and Writers Magazine, which is a great magazine. You'll never guess who reads it, right? Maybe poets and writers. So if you open this magazine and you go to page 12, you'll see an article from booksellers to owners about some independent bookstores that are being like the employees are buying the store. And it's written by Lynn Rosen. So I think you should read it. It's a very good article. Thank you. All right, so a couple more big books for you and good books for you, okay? Ready for a few more? Emily St. John Mandel's new book, Sea of Tranquility. And if you read Station 11, you know how cool she is. The Glass Hotel is a prequel, or was the first one. You don't have to read it, but she does mention some of the same characters, so it might be fun to spot them. But it can be a standalone if you want it to be. Trust by Hernan Diaz. It's billed as a historical fiction, but it's told in a really creative way. 4 different sections, 4 different perspectives. I'm going to be reading this. I'm really excited about this one. The Last Confessions of Sylvia P. I really liked. Yeah, it's a good one, right? It is like a literary thriller, and it's about 3 different points of view. One of them is a psychiatrist who's based on the person who really was Sylvia Plath's psychiatrist when she was in McLean after she tried to kill herself by suicide. Another is a fictional poet who's in this. So Sylvia Plath became very involved in what was called the confessional poetry movement led by Robert Lowell. And Anne Sexton was sort of her frenemy. And this poet is based on Anne Sexton. And then the third character is a contemporary character who is an archivist who works for an auction house, and someone brings to her 2 notebooks that they found in an attic of an old house that turn out to maybe be a handwritten early draft of the bell jar. And that's the point from which the story takes off. And you keep jumping around to all these different perspectives. And it was a good read. It was fun. And then, of course, you have to go reread the bell jar afterwards. Yep. Okay. Douglas Stewart, speaking of Booker Prizes, the author of Shuggie Bain, which won last year's Booker, he has a new book out, Bound to Be Completely Depressing, Bring You Down, Make You Miserable. Read it soon. Tessa Hadley has a new book called Free Love. I really like Tessa Hadley. She's one of my favorite Irish writers. You know, I love Irish writers, and she's really good. And speaking of Irish writers, there was a book I read many years ago called The Undertaking, which was this so interesting book that was told from the perspective of the Germans during World War II. And the idea was that the soldiers were given leave if they agreed to be married to someone. So they would go get fixed up with these brides, and they'd get 2 weeks leave. They'd come back to, they didn't even get married in the same place. They kind of got married at the same time in different places. And then they'd get to come to Berlin for 2 weeks, meet their wives, and then go back to war, where they were headed towards Stalingrad, where, you know, we knew good things were not going to happen. And the book flips back and forth between these two perspectives, and it's told almost entirely in dialogue. It's so well done. And it's interesting, right? Because there you are reading this book from the perspective of the Nazis. And, you know, you're not supposed to, you don't want to be there, right? You don't want to have any sympathy for them. Yeah, they were all German. Yeah. Yeah, but of course, well, so of course, you know, when the Russians finally captured Berlin, what happened is what's happening now in Ukraine. So it is actually a timely book to read. But anyway, then Audrey McGee in this wonderful book, The Undertaking, kind of disappeared, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And now she's back with a new book that I just discovered today. I know nothing about it except that her first book was really good. She's really good. Ken Kalpas is a local Philadelphia writer, and I've heard great things about this. He's such a nice guy. I hope this book does really well, because he's a good man. Gary Steingart's latest book, Our Country Friends, sort of based on being holed up during the pandemic with some friends in the country and what happens there. And he's a good satirist, good writer. This has been out for a while, but if you liked A Gentleman in Moscow, you might want to read The Lincoln Highway. Of course, very different sort of book. He does like a different genre with every book, but he's a good writer and he writes fat books. This caught my eye, Sarai Walker, because her previous book, Dietland, was supposed to be very good. And this is her new book, and it's about 5 sisters. And every time they get married, they die, which kind of made me think of like the virgin suicides or something, but I'm intrigued by this one.
A lot of girls. Make a different decision.
That's exactly what the book is about. The 5th girl is like, I don't think so. And then, of course, Anthony Doerr, who we know for All the Light We Cannot See, which also won a Pulitzer Prize, just to bring us back around to that. And this is his newest, Cloud Cuckoo Land. Has anyone read it? Have you read Cloud Cuckoo Land? It's so good. It's so brilliant. It might take you a couple hundred pages to get into it. And I don't usually stick around for a couple hundred pages, but you're going to want to, because then you're going to reach a point where you say, oh, that's brilliant. Did you read it, Kate?
No.
Oh, it's, yeah, just keep struggling. Keep going. Keep going, because it's really a book about storytelling, because it's about this manuscript that was written by an ancient Greek writer, and it filters through the story and the translation of the story for generations to come, and they're all trying to read and understand this story of Cloud Cuckoo Land. And it just shows how powerful storytelling is, and how stories go down through the generations and still have meaning. And like, what could be a better message than that? Yeah, so on that note, I think I'll finish. I don't know if there are any questions. I don't know if we can manage to take questions. I will close by telling you, first of all, I'm going to be doing this every 2 weeks, so tell all your friends. Second of all, we have a couple other events coming up at the store. We have Dogfish Head people coming on June 9th. Well, we're not allowed to serve beer. They did want to do tastings, but we're not allowed in Delaware to serve beer here. But if you stick around after the event, we can all go pub hopping. Or pub crawling, or whatever you do when you're going from pub to pub. You read The Lincoln Highway?
Where?
Oh, The Crawdads. Well, The Crawdads, did you like it?
I love.
I
I
did
love.
And The Crawdads is going to have a new wave of popularity because a movie's coming out and
Right.
Taylor Swift wrote this song. And yes. And then if you're a fan of William Kent Kruger, he is going to be here in town Thursday night, 2 more nights at the Chase Center. It's the library hosting the Newcastle County Reads. It's a free event. And I have postcards about that. Yeah.